While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us here on this wonderful election eve. We're live here until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comment online wherever we're streaming on the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, Free Solution group, or the Kevin Wilson page or Kevin Wilson Twitter account. Wherever you're listening today, appreciate you all being here. And of course, we have the podcast as well, all up to date too, where we have, including our Thursday online only episodes too. So if you guys are listening on the radio, Tim O'Connor, who used to host one of the days here on A Free Solution, him and I do a Thursday evening show. And the topic of that show was pandemic amnesty. And I had a couple other points to make about that too, just as we're heading into the election and, you know, whether or not that is part of any voting decision. And we'd love to hear from you if pandemic response is motivating your vote tomorrow, or if you've already voted in early voting. Give us a call, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. So just kind of general stuff on the election coming up. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm very curious to see if there's a red shift in New York State. You know, I would love a gold shift. I'd love more libertarians elected, but I don't think I'm going to get my wish this year. Maybe in the future, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But we'll see if the polls and the outlier polls that show Zeldin close to Kathy Hochul end up being correct. Again, though, some of the polls that their campaign has been pushing have been a little bit outliers. I think it's probably going to end up with Kathy Hochul winning, given the registration advantage and the fear people have of Lee Zeldin among like moderates too. Again, this is just kind of anecdotal. This isn't poll stuff, and what issues are important to voters. We'll see what happens. And similar thing in the local congressional election, at least where I live in Monroe County, where we have Singletary versus Morelli. I think that there's a better chance for Singletary to do well here than the Republican in the last election. I think it'll be maybe a bit closer to what happened when Marcassini came very close. It was like less than 1,000 votes to upsetting Louis Slaughter back in the day, just because he has, again, this is setting aside the issues here, but he has a more interesting voting coalition than any of the previous two Republicans who ran, just because he did serve as police chief in the city. He has, some other bases of support that could eat into Joe Morelli's Democratic base. I'm interested to see what happens there. And what's interesting is that, in this election, at least locally, like a lot of it's been centered around crime and economy stuff. They've kind of both narrowed into, what issues are motivating voters. So when I ask, like, is pandemic policy motivating you? That's part of it too, right? Like, is it motivating you at the federal level, at the state level, local level, whichever it is? What messages those candidates seem to be pushing is somewhat different than what I see in my news feed. And I'm not sure which one is salient versus what, maybe Facebook thinks I want to see this thing, and I see less crime stuff, but other news feeds are filled with that. We'll see. And just to acknowledge some folks who are listening online, Gene listening on Facebook, just saying good afternoon. Thanks for being here, Gene. And Patty on Facebook says, third parties off the ballot is my motivation to vote. I am somebody and my opinion matters, whether they want to hear my voice or not. Hashtag write in Larry Sharp. Hashtag write in Zachary Remain. And Zachary Remain is running up in Plattsburgh. He's running a write-in campaign for a local office up there. And again, something Tim and I talked about on our Thursday show too. So I don't know much about him. Just I know that that's a campaign that's happening up that way. And again, in terms of like what's motivating folks, love to hear from you. What's motivating you to turn out to vote tomorrow? 585-346-3000, or leave your comment online. Uh, the reason why I think like crime might be the big motivating factor in every election is I also got somehow I got on Joe Morelli's texting list. I have no idea why. I've been getting just bombarded with Democratic mailers, possibly because I'm like labeled as independent, quote, independent now instead of libertarian. And so I've been getting bombarded with like Democratic stuff. The Democrats have been targeting me heavily, and I have no idea why. They're barking up the wrong tree in most of the cases. I'm not gonna lie, but I've been getting text messages from a bunch of campaigns, and Joe Morelli's campaign sent me one that was talking about how he's going to fix crime by getting illegal guns off the street, by implementing federal bail reform rules to get criminals off the street, and funding the police, which is interesting, right? So like we got two candidates. We have a former chief of police and a career politician running, and both of them are promising to give more federal resources to the police. I am skeptical of that for a couple different reasons. One, we've seen how it works out in the past. We've seen how the civil asset forfeiture programs and other federal expenditure programs end up militarizing the police. We have some of the old federal police and military police military equipment that's getting sent to local police departments, and when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Like it's why are these local police departments using, MRAPs, or why are they using and I kid you not, like they have like grenade launchers in LA. Why are they using all this stuff? And does it create an incentive to use excessive force in certain situations? I think that's a question worth asking. And what kind of bums me out about Joe Morelli, and again, I was never gonna vote for the guy given the totality of his record. I mean, for goodness sakes, I ran against him. But what bums me out about that guy is like it's just there was this move to reform some of the worst excesses of policing in the United States, and he's chickening out on it. Like that's one of the few things that I found redeeming about the Democratic Party, and they're chickening out on it. Like they're trying to roll back criminal justice reform, roll back, responsible spending on police departments, and figure out, the state and local efforts to figure out better ways to approach policing. And we want to get the federal government involved in this. No, I don't want Joe Morelli doing it. I don't want Singletary doing it. I don't want either of them jumping in and imposing rules. Because here's what happens every time the federal government gets involved in something that is essentially a local issue: is suddenly there's going to be strings attached. This is what always happens. And suddenly, they're getting funding for their police departments in the same way they get funding for education, the same way they get funding for infrastructure. And oh, well, if you want to continue getting that funding that you didn't get dependent on, you you have to do X, Y, and Z. You have to implement these other programs. You have to implement certain whatever requirements, environmental requirements, whatever it is, right? There's there's always a string attached to whatever money you end up getting from the federal government, or you have to comply with different sets of laws and rules and regulations and codes that you might not normally have to do or want to do. And uh yeah, that's a bad thing. That's a dangerous game to play. And we see how that played out with education. That could happen with police too. We should continue to have a state and local approach to police. In fact, most of the time, crime is a local specific issue. It isn't a phenomenon that ought to be uh that ought to be controlled at the national level. And when I get text messages like what I got from the Morelli campaign, I think three things. So, A, you're going to spend more money we don't have. B, they're talking about getting illegal guns off the street, but what they really mean is making it illegal for otherwise law-abiding Americans to be able to defend themselves. And C, they're getting the federal government more involved in local law enforcement, which will come with strings. It always will. I don't want a federal version of bail reform to come in and be a mess in either direction. I don't want there to be any. Yeah, he said he's urging state leaders to do something about it. All right, sure, but what what do people in Washington know about the situation in New York State? What the people in Washington know about the situation in Florida? What do they know about the situation in Iowa? Like, they don't know. We know here a little bit better. Now, there are serious problems, serious things that need to be addressed in the Rochester community in particular, in New York State in particular. But I don't have faith that that's going to be better solved by someone in DC, by a group of, you know, Republicans and Democrats who know nothing about my life here. And that's a big thing I want to get to today is that sometimes even knowledge in this in any particular area doesn't mean that you know what's best to run my life, to run the lives of people anywhere. And as long as we continue voting for folks who are going to try to control our lives, to dictate policy from far away, we're going to be in a bad position, and politics is going to get worse and worse. All right, thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Hey, this is Kevin Wilson, host of A Free Solution. You ever need a tool for just one project, but didn't want to spend the cash for something you'd use just once or twice? Well, there's a new tool library in Rochester where you can borrow just the thing you need instead of buying a new one. It's called the Tool Shed from the Southeast Area Coalition, and membership starts at just $25 a year. Use it for home projects or to support your business. Learn more and become a member at seektoolshed.org. That's SEAC toolshed.org.
Only available in the WISL store at WISL1040.com. Official top quality tees, hoodies, and coffee mugs depicting the colorful WISL logo or the already famous Mount Worstmore line of merch depicting Mount Rushmore style are for worst presidents. Of course, you know who is front and center up on that mountain. WISL official items make perfect gifts, or they're a great way for you to make a personal statement. Locally produced and sold only in the WISL store at WISL1040.com.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, host today. Thank you so much for joining us here live on WYSL until 2 p.m. And it sounds like we have a caller on the line too, Joe from Schenectady. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Hi. I was wondering, with the U.S. Senate race, I was looking at Joe Pinion, and I was also looking at Diane Sayre, and she has some really good ideas too. But I've never really heard of the LaRoche Party. Who do you think would be the best person to select if I was going to select someone? We're not selecting Schumer. So he's been in office too long, and he's too corrupt.
Yeah, so I know a bit about both those candidates, and in fact, if you look on the Free Solution channel, Diane Sayre was interviewed by Tim O'Connor, so you can see what she's about.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, so we're checking out if you're looking for other voices. But the other person to check out too, he's running a write-in campaign, is Tom Queter. He's running as a libertarian. He's running a write-in campaign, so that's who I'm going to be voting for in the U.S. Senate election. No, it's just he's a bit closer to my values than Pinion is, and Sayre is as well. So that's who I'm looking at.
Oh, okay. I'll check him out. What's his last name?
Tom Queter is his name. So it's not Quitter, but it kind of looks like
Oh,
it,
okay.
but Tom Queter.
I got you. All right. I hope they count all these write-in votes. It makes me wonder. Sometimes with the write-in, if they end up getting counted or how they get counted.
No, it's a great question. And actually, what happens is that if there is a 2% difference between the top two vote getters, they will count the write-in votes. So
Okay.
so that's going to apply to the gubernatorial elections. There's Larry Sharp and Howie Hawkins running write-in campaigns, the Senate elections, and anywhere else. So there just needs to be enough of a difference. Otherwise, they just don't count them. They just say, those are write-in votes, and that's it.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Right on. All right. Thanks for the call, Joe. And again, folks, if you want to call in too, give us a call, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. And again, my PSA on this too, I was going to make sure I mentioned it before the end of the show, is that there are some write-in candidates running, Larry Sharp among them, who is, you can list him here on Tuesdays. And his running mate too, Andrew Hollister, who's from Rochester. He's running for lieutenant governor with Larry again. So you can write them both in that same line: Larry Sharp for governor, Andrew Hollister for lieutenant governor, if you're so inclined. But there's other folks too, like Howie Hawkins, if you want to go in the green direction. And then folks like Tom Queter, who's running on the as a libertarian, as a write-in candidate for U.S. Senate. He's been on the show before too, talked to policy, and he talks about benefit reforms. He talks about lowering taxes. He talks about again the same things that I end up talking about and Larry ends up talking about too, but specific to U.S. Senate issues. So definitely a candidate worth looking up if you feel like Chuck Schumer or Mr. Pinion, who's running as the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, or Diane Sayer, who's running as the LaRouche Party candidate. If you don't feel like they represent your views, there's another guy running. You can vote for him, which is what I'm going to do, because he's close to where I am. That's what it is. And all right, so anyway, talking about just kind of like the state of this race in general. It's again going to be interesting to see what ends up motivating people to vote. I suspect it's a whole bunch of issues, right? Is it crime? Yeah, that is an issue. It's a thing motivating people in New York State, and I recognize that from, again, getting Democratic messaging on crime, like, oh no, we're doing something about it, we promise. And again, which again is like, as a libertarian, I'm kind of like, I'm pro criminal justice reform. I wish you guys would cave on this, but I get why they're doing that. Is because their polling is probably suggesting that they're vulnerable on this issue, and that's motivating moderates and independents to vote Republican this year. So again, we'll see how that ends up going. And if you do want to read, I did post a screenshot of the text message that campaign sent me. So if you go to facebook.com/Kevin Wilson ROC, I posted a screenshot of that text message if you want to see what the heck I'm talking about. The text message I got from the Democratic congressional candidates campaign. Because again, for whatever reason, getting a bunch, and I see Patty on Facebook is getting a bunch too. They're trying to get those independent voters, right? No, we're independent thinkers, Patty. I agree. We're independent thinkers in these situations, and that doesn't mean that we're going to vote any particular direction. I usually split ticket when I vote. If there are no libertarians on the ballot, I'm just going to look and see who the better candidate is. I'm not going to vote straight line B. I'm not going to vote straight line A. Usually I'll look for a libertarian candidate. And if I don't like someone on the ballot, or both candidates on the ballot, I'll just not vote on that line, or I'll write in someone. And I'm going to be doing that on a few different races. So right now, my plan is I have a couple Republicans I'm going to vote for. I think one Democrat that I might end up voting for, and maybe, and that one's a maybe, and then some libertarian candidates I'm going to write in, and a couple I don't know. And I tell you, I'll tell you what too. I give this PSA every year too, is if you don't know, it's probably better just to leave it blank rather than accidentally vote for someone who is maybe not the best person running for that position. And I always say that because there have been races where These have happened in primary races where people have voted for absolute goofballs, or sometimes, communists or sometimes fascists, and because they don't know, because they just like, well, I usually vote this party, so I'll vote this party. Pay attention to who you're voting for. There's a lot of judge elections like this too, and I know it's tough to research those elections, but trying to figure out like, well, is this person actually qualified? Do they know what they're doing? Are they going to do a good job here? Are they going to be effective, you know, uh, in their position, depending on what it is, whether it's family court or county court or whatever position, or Supreme Court, whatever position they're running for. We have judge elections in New York State. But if you don't know, maybe it's better you just don't vote in that. Like that's my opinion. You can call in and yell at me if you want about that. 585-346-3000. But I'd rather know who I'm voting for and make sure that I'm not voting for someone who's going to be detrimental to the people who are going to come before them and judges, or someone who's going to implement totally bonkers stuff in the assembly or something, right? I want to know what I'm voting for. And I'd rather not, if I don't know, I'd rather not consider, just leave it blank. That's me. And then, and then there's the back of the ballot too, right? Again, yes or no? I did a whole show on that last week on the environmental bond. Do we want to take on the $4.2 billion in debt here in New York State? That's what's on the ballot. So make sure you check that out. And can get a couple other folks. Jean, who's saying she heard of or she had met Tom Queter before. Again, nice guy, and good dude running for U.S. Senate. Had him on the show before, so you can look in our show archives and listen to him. And he'll call in occasionally too. And Patty on Facebook says, "I know I got one vote from me." Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how many write-in votes I'm gonna give to my friends this year. Just because, yeah, I'm not excited for Republicans to win either. Just because we'll get to the pandemic amnesty thing in a second too, maybe the next segment. But with the Republicans, they talk a big game about fighting tyranny on the pandemic front, but are they keeping those powers in place? Are they planning them to use them for their own purposes? Are they still going to spend ridiculous amounts of money without any accountability whatsoever? Are they going to expand our foreign policy, our foreign, intervention footprint abroad if they're acting on a federal level? Are they going to actually protect our Second Amendment right? And are they going to show up to vote on key legislation when there's a possibility that our right to self-defense is going to be taken away? And unfortunately, the answer isn't universally, yeah, they're going to be on the right side of these things. You have to look into it individually. You have to understand, well, how are they talking about this? Are they weaseling their way out of discussions on this? And unfortunately, Lee Zeldin is one of those guys. I'm not 100% confident that he would protect our Second Amendment, our right to self-defense at the state level. I don't know that he would, given his record of not showing up in Congress and when he was in the New York State legislature. And so you can hope that, well, gosh, at least if he's doing nothing, that's better than the active demolition of our rights in New York State by Kathy Hochul. But I don't want to be defensive. I don't want to just say, well, maybe they'll do nothing and we'll have nothing for 4 years and that's fine. No, I want to start making sure that we have these rights. I want to start protecting those. I want to be assertive in protecting our liberty. And by giving these defensive votes to Republicans who, if we're lucky, do nothing, but if we're unlucky, we'll continue maybe at a slightly slower pace to erode our freedoms, to erode our rights, then what are we really gaining here? And it's hard to say. Again, I hope I'm wrong about that stuff. And maybe that's the better solution, but I don't think it is. That's why I'm a libertarian. That's why I voted for the candidates I voted for. Thanks again for joining us here on The Free Solution. When we come back, we'll dive more into that pandemic amnesty. Just a few other points I didn't get to make last week. But if you want to give us a call to explain, why are you showing up to vote tomorrow? Give us a call, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Pray for the USA. AM 1040 Avon Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, and FM 95.5 Spencerport.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center for tonight. Nice and clear out there, a little breezy, a little chilly. The nice full moonshine and bright temperatures in the 30s. Watch for the total lunar eclipse first thing tomorrow morning, right around 6 a.m. And then lots of sunshine for Tuesday, Election Day, but chilly in the 40s. On Wednesday, after a frosty morning, should be a nice afternoon near 60, closer to 70 on Thursday. I'm Rich Caniglia, WYSL.
Oh, those injury attorney ads.
Hurt on your couch? Call 555-OUCH.
It's kind of cute watching that injury attorney buying breakfast for a crash test dummy, but while fun is fun, there's nothing amusing about getting your life back together after a personal injury or a motorcycle accident, or when you need defense for a DWI charge. Christopher Johnson takes your case seriously, and you'll feel like you're his only client because when you meet with him, your case gets 100% of his attention. So instead of cute singing jingles and magic phone numbers,
Fall out of a tree? Call 33333.
write this number down and keep it with you. 585-415-3803. 415-3803. After all, Christopher Johnson knows you're no dummy. Get individual attention and integrity, experience, and expertise. Put the power of one on your legal team. 415-3803. Stay safe, be healthy, drive sober. Christopher Johnson Attorney, personal injury, car or motorcycle accidents, DWI Defense.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Are you looking to update the kitchen, bath, or flooring in your home, but don't know where to begin? Whether it's cabinetry, carpeting, hardwood flooring, tile, or kitchen and bathroom remodeling, Claridge Design Center in Chilai Paul Plaza is the place to start. Locally owned with over 25 years in business, Claridge custom designs and builds quality remodeling projects throughout Rochester and Monroe County. At Claridge, the visions and ideas you have for your home are developed with the experienced Claridge designers to make your dream project a reality. And the quality of service you receive at Claridge is second to none. For more information or to schedule an appointment, call Claridge at 889-5800 or visit their website to meet the Claridge team. See examples of their finished work at claridgedesigncenter.com.
Judge Jason Cook was born and raised here in the Finger Lakes, part of a fifth-generation farming family. He's worked for decades to help families in our region. As Yates County District Attorney, Jason Cook put dangerous criminals in jail where they belong. And for the last 5 years, he's delivered justice as county judge. Now, Judge Cook is running for state Supreme Court to put his decades of courtroom experience to work for all of us. Judge Jason Cook, the right experience for state Supreme Court.
Paid for by the friends of Judge Jason Cook.
Introducing the checking account that pays you, Advantage Rewards Checking. Swipe your debit card 15 times a month, get $5 back. 30 times get you $10. Plus, with Advantage Rewards Checking, you can stash some cash with our Roundup option and save on overdraft and transfer fees too. And as always, you'll get free online banking, bill pay credit score, and real-time alerts. Talk about a rewarding experience. Open your Advantage Rewards Checking account online or in person today. Minimum monthly direct deposit and e-statements required. Membership subject to eligibility. Member NCUA. See website for details.
I'm Stephen Nichols. Since 1984, Nichols has been family operated and a trusted name for home service. We provide plumbing and electrical installation and service. And I am thrilled to announce that we are growing and looking to add to our scope of services. We are looking for a professional handyman who is skilled in drywall repair, carpentry, and more. If you are interested in joining the best team in Rochester, call 585-299-3101 or visit nicholselectric.com to fill out an application.
Livingston County Pizza Company and Gluten Free Bakery has a great deal on Tuesdays. A large 4-topping pizza for $18, regular or gluten-free. Call 226-9575. Open Tuesday through Sunday. Livingston County Pizza Company and Gluten Free Bakery in Avon.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
All right. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thanks again for joining us here on this wonderful Monday afternoon. We're live here on WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comments online on the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, Free Solution group, Kevin Wilson Facebook page, or Kevin Wilson Twitter, wherever you are today. Appreciate y'all being here. And getting a few more comments from folks. I know Patty on there is talking about how started out as a Bernie supporter, became a libertarian. That's, I always say this too. Like, if you arrive at liberty, I don't care where you came from. If you're advocating for good policies, whatever. I'm not much of a tribalist. Glad you're here. Glad you're talking about these ideas, and hope to bring you along wherever you're able to go. And so, just a couple more points about like the election stuff, and I want to talk about the pandemic amnesty stuff too. Again, I did a show on this Thursday. This kind of story went viral last week about it was in the Atlantic. It's from an author named Emily Oster, and the title was called "It's Time for a Pandemic Amnesty," right? And it talked about whether or not we ought to kind of give people a pass for policies advocated for during the pandemic. And essentially because people like just roasted the author for it, right? And it's kind of like taking on a life of its own, right? And people are at least posting memes about how they're voting based on this issue, right? Which I think is fair in some cases. Now, I think that the ire directed from the right at this author is maybe a little bit overextended, given that she was one of the folks advocating, late 2020, early 2021, to, hey, why are we not opening schools? So she was one of the first people to do that, who wasn't like very right wing, right? Like there's a bunch of right wing folks who were like, yeah, let's open schools immediately, and she was saying, hey, look, the data doesn't make sense, right? It's not like we shouldn't shut down because of ideological priors. It's, hey, we shouldn't shut down because now that we've done that, we have enough data to know that this is a bad idea. And given the new information we have, we need to shift policy. And that's what I would like to see out of most politicians, right? It's that when presented with new evidence that what you're doing, and she's not a politician, by the way, but when presented with new evidence that what you're doing is failing, you don't just stick to your ideological guns. You don't do the wrong thing, even if it is going to cost you some political points. You don't do the wrong thing, even if it's going to upset your base. You're not going to do the wrong thing just to virtue signal to the voters who are going to support you. And unfortunately, that's how the major parties operate. Both the Democrats and Republicans operated this way, particularly badly during COVID, but other issues as well. Like you still got Democrats talking about how they want to issue stimulus checks to fight inflation. And so much of the base of the Democratic base thinks that like that's the thing to do. Gosh, you know what we got to do? We got to spend more money to help people out with inflation. And I can't help but wonder, like, well, a lot of these Democrats running at every level of office got to know that that's going to be harmful, right? Maybe not. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but I would like to think that they know that that's harmful, but they cynically choose not to act on that best information. And so when it comes to the pandemic amnesty stuff, I think the same way, right? Again, in the beginning of the pandemic, I could say, well, there's a lot of stuff we didn't know. We had some bad data that suggested that COVID was a lot more deadly than it was across a broader swath of the population than it ended up being. And precaution, given the information we had, might have been warranted for a couple months, right? Okay, sure. I get that. Again, I was still kind of against lockdowns for a bunch of different reasons, and you go back and list. I got the whole show archive. You can listen to those. I was against lockdowns because I felt that there was effective ways that people could keep themselves safe and evaluate their own risk in that situation. But okay, sure, I'll give folks a pass for that. So where I arrive at this isn't like a blanket pandemic amnesty. It's you had some information, you acted on that information in a way that I might not have agreed with, but I can say that you acted in good faith, that you did what you thought was best given the circumstances, the tools, and the actual dangers to the public at hand. Okay, sure. Now, once you know that information is incorrect, though, once you know that there are better things that we can do to respond to the pandemic than lock everyone in their homes, to keep kids out of school, to close outdoor restaurants like they did in some places, to tape up playgrounds. Once you knew that that was nonsense, and we knew a few months in, and you kept persisting in doing those things, that's when I got a problem. That's where I'm like, I don't want to. I want to give you a pass for that. I don't want to, I don't want to give uh, the folks who are, like still demanding masking outdoors as like a policy prescription, despite knowing that A, that's ridiculous in and of itself, and B, the mask mandates, regardless of the individual effectiveness of any given mask on any individual wearer, the mask mandates didn't work. They just didn't. The way people complied with them and changed their behavior in relation to those mandates didn't work. And using government force to enforce those rules never made any sense. It should have always been persuasive. Again, people did this far beyond when it made sense because it was good for their tribe. It was good because they felt like that was their way of virtue signaling responsibility. Now, again, the other side of this isn't instant either. There are many folks who have said and continue to say COVID's not a big deal, that it hasn't really killed anyone, that's just a conspiracy to control us, and that's not really real either. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, another 5,000 people died of COVID in the United States. Over 1,000,000 people ended up dying, and I remember, like, early on in the pandemic being like, "Hey, this might actually be bad." Like, 1,000,000 people could die of this if this holds up. I was talking about this in April, and people like, "You're ridiculous, you're fear-mongering, just go outside, don't worry about anything, it's good." And I ended up catching COVID, I ended up being fine, but for some people, for anyone who is medically vulnerable, it is still a real thing, and we need to act accordingly. So how do we like sort this out into a political situation? How do we sort this out into, a possible voting decision? Well, first of all, I'm not going to vote for anyone who was supportive of emergency orders because we can't give up our liberty to any one single executive who can exercise broad legislative and bureaucratic power over us. And so all those folks, including Republicans who voted to give Andrew Cuomo emergency powers that were as extensive as they were, that could easily be turned on the way they were, yeah, they don't get my vote. Sorry. None of those folks who did that, that's always a bad idea. And you need to have the guts in an emergency situation, in a situation where people are terrified, in a situation where people are fearful, to say, okay, you can have the power to do X, Y, and Z to address this specific thing, but that's it. And here's a limited time, and you can't just declare a new emergency and reactivate it. So we have, my goodness, Kathy Hochul, declaring new emergencies for COVID constantly. We have people like Joe Biden too on the federal level saying like, well, in a COVID emergency, we can give student loan forgiveness. Are you serious? Come on. Does that pass the smell test? Sure, Joe Biden can appreciate that. No, it doesn't. No, we're not buying it. That's ridiculous. So the Republicans and the Democrats who empowered executives to go extend their unilateral authority. No, I can't do that. Again, and then for the folks who maybe got the policy wrong in the beginning and it ended up changing their mind relatively quickly based on new data that was emerging, the best practices. Yeah, like those folks, I'll kind of give them a pass. The folks who continued on with ridiculous liberty restricting policies, months and months and months later, yeah, no, I'm less about their amnesty. Not gonna lie. Just I think they deserve to face electoral consequences for their fear allowing them to reduce our liberty. There has to be some consequences. There has to be some balance. We have to do better with this. And we knew better ways to do this and chose not to. And I'll say the same thing on the other side too. Again, the folks who are completely delusional about this stuff, the folks who pushed false cures for this stuff, the folks who, spread misinformation about this stuff. If you do that as a politician, yeah, I'm not going to vote for you either. If you did that, you're caught up in some of the fear in the beginning and you weren't sure and you've kind of come around. Sure. All right. Yeah. The folks who ended up squashing the spread of information, a little bit hard to forgive them. You know, why did it take so long for us to talk about the lap leak story when there was some evidence there? Well, it's got suppressed on social media. There needs to be some accountability for that too. Now, whether or not we're going to get that, I don't know. In the end, we do need to move on, though. In the end, we do need to figure out ways to balance what deserves accountability, like perhaps the nursing home situation in New York State. Does that deserve a level of accountability? Yeah. And what deserves a pass? Yeah, no, the folks in the beginning, I was one of them washing their mail and their groceries. Yeah, okay. It was a bit silly. It was a bit fearful. We learned new things and we moved on because we're going to have to move on. We all learn new things all the time to move on. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
As a veteran of the United States military, I can finally get the opportunity to enjoy special events, things that we couldn't afford, thanks to VetTix. Every empty seat at a concert, a game, or a play is a missed opportunity to say thanks to a veteran and service member. We can give our veterans a special event where they too can create their own cherished memories. Visit vettix.org. Find out how you can make a difference in a veteran's life.
My name is Timmy Smith, and on behalf of the Life Pact, I want to implore you to exercise your patriotic duty and vote only for candidates that support our God-given right and constitutionally acknowledged right to keep and bear arms. Of all the rights that are endowed to us by our Creator, arguably, this is the greatest of them. There are politicians on both sides of the aisle that want to disarm us. They know that a disarmed people are a feeble people, and make no doubts about it. There are politicians at all levels of government that want to subdue. They want to conquer our American way. We at the Life Pack not only support your right to bear whatever arm of your choosing, we cherish it. This message was paid for by the Life Pack, LYFE.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thanks again for joining us. We're live here on WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comment online, the Free Solution Facebook page, YouTube channel, group, or the Kevin Wilson page or Twitter, wherever you are. Appreciate you being here. And, So that's I gave my 2 cents on the pandemic amnesty. Again, Tim and I had a great discussion on this on Thursday. He's definitely a little bit less on the side of offering any forgiveness for the folks who stripped away our liberty, whereas me, I'm more like, hey, for the folks who are ridiculous on both sides of this, there's some level of forgiveness that's necessary. It's the folks who drive me nuts are just the ones who, despite evidence to the contrary, despite new emerging information about what we ought to be doing in response to a pandemic, if you're still holding on to your ideological priors, that's dangerous. That's ridiculous. I think of the stories of in the Soviet Union how they tried to implement like socialist agriculture practices, uh, about like plants cooperating and stuff. Like, look at, I'll have to post a link to this, but it's absolutely ridiculous. Where they had an ideologically driven like agricultural sciences, and in addition to the intentional policy of starving like dissidents and you know other nationalities, they also starved themselves just by implementing this ridiculous ideologically driven policy, because that's what their party, that's what their ideologues wanted to hear. And it can drive you to some ridiculous places that hurt real folks. Again, when you're driving ahead without evidence and without the data to back you because you want to gain political power, those are dangerous folks in society. Those are the most dangerous politicians. And to that end, because I don't want those dangerous ideologues ruling my life, I'm libertarian, because those folks can advocate for their positions out in the public sphere. They can say their positions as they will, and I know some of that gets shut down on social media, and I mentioned that in the last segment, but for the most part, you can go into the public square and advocate what you want to advocate for. The difference is when you give that person or that group of people power over your life, that their ideologically and not data-driven decisions are what controls you. And even if it is data-driven too, you ought to have that liberty to be able to manage your own life, because individual situations are different than aggregate situations. Politicians don't know the best way to run your life. You know how to run your life better than politicians. And anyone, Republican, Democrat, or any other party who thinks that they know what's best for you is not necessarily right. And even if they were right, you still ought to have the liberty to run your own life as long as you're not hurting people or taking their stuff. And if they're going to use the force of violence to try to compel you to act in the way they want you to act, that's immoral. That's wrong. So that's why I struggle to support any politicians who advocate for policies that do that, from the drug war to, mandates related to the pandemic, to anything else, to regulations, whatever it is. I struggle to support politicians to who are going to do that to us. And again, it's fascinating, and it doesn't matter. Like, it runs a whole gamut too of politicians who sound smart and sound competent and have just differing visions of how they want to control you. And that's what I see in the congressional race. That's what I see in the gubernatorial election too. It's just what level of executive control do you want? The one who's going to use their executive powers to declare a crime emergency and take away some of your constitutional rights, or do you want to vote for the candidate who's going to use a COVID emergency to take away your liberty in other areas and to shut down schools and to do all sorts of other ridiculous stuff? Which one do you want? Well, I want neither. It's not any better when just because you have folks who are competent and can explain their policies well, it doesn't mean that things are better. I mean, you got the situation in Pennsylvania where I don't know if it's better. It's probably not better, but like I look at that race between Oz and Fetterman, and I'm like, wow, I'm glad I don't live there, but if I did, I would want both of them to lose. Like, neither of them are in a good position to be a competent U.S. senator. But I guess at least you know what you're getting. There's other politicians who are really good at putting on airs and talking in a nice way to make it sound like they are the best person to run your lives. They still aren't. It doesn't matter how nicely they put it. That U.S. Senate race between those two strips away that veneer of legitimacy that politicians put on themselves to give themselves license to run your life just because they have popular Democratic support. And you got politicians like Obama, and you got celebrities like Oprah jumping in to support this Democratic candidate who, regardless if you agree with what his positions are, doesn't seem well. And I don't say that to be like mean, but he doesn't seem well. And then you got the Republican, and all sorts of Republicans are jumping in to support this guy too, who made a career off of peddling falsehoods, off of just jumping in and saying like whatever ridiculous cure the next person came on a show to promote. And again, setting aside the ideological differences, I don't trust someone who does that. And I don't trust someone who is in serious need of medical recovery to be a competent and good U.S. senator. I'm glad I don't have to vote in that election. I'm sure of many of the folks I want to vote for in New York State. In that election, I know there's a libertarian running. It's a dude named Eric in that state, but a lot of those folks a lot of the voters in that area feel like they have to choose between one of those two. Again, it strips away the veneer of legitimacy and the veneer of competence that many politicians have. But that's the reality of what made it is, that a lot of times people don't have these skills that are transferable. And I think about that too in the context of like the Twitter situation. And bear with me for a second, but Elon Musk was very good at building organizations like PayPal. I really wish he stayed focused on the SpaceX stuff. I was excited to see like him take a private company to Mars. Like, how cool is that, right? If he's able to actually, do that and get a colony established there, that would be awesome. Those skills that he has in those arenas aren't necessarily transferring over to Twitter. We'll see how things go. But he might be spending $44 billion to do something that may end up messing with the platform. We'll see what happens. But I see what's happening with his management of developers there, what's happening with the verification rollout, what's happening with everything else. Just because he's really good in one area doesn't mean he's going to competently manage something else. And I think the same thing about politicians. Just because they talk well, just because they can speak to policy, just because they've run a company, does not mean that they're qualified to run your life. Not all skills are transferable. And when in doubt, err on the side of liberty. I'd like to see that in the pandemic situation. I'd like to see that in criminal justice situations. I'd like to see that in economic situations. And not enough politicians end up doing that. They err on the side of, well, I sort of know what's going on, so I'm going to implement this policy that's going to affect the lives of hundreds of millions of people, even if we're jumping into it half-baked. No, err on the side of liberty, and I'm not going to be supporting candidates who refuse to do that. And just to get to a couple more of these comments too, Gene, who lives in Pennsylvania, says, "You are so right about Oz and Fetterman." Yeah. And unfortunately, that's a high-profile race, but there are other situations where that happens too. Well, have a great afternoon, folks. I'm going to be back on Wednesday. We'll talk about what ended up happening in the election. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, folks. Take care.